The unconquerable artifact. The monolith of Vega Prime had defied every sentient species in the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Towering 500 meters above the planet's surface, its obsidian surface absorbed all light while reflecting none. Perfectly smooth except for a series of intricate grooves that wrapped around its surface like frozen lightning, it had neither entrance nor apparent function. Yet every spacefaring species believed it contained power beyond imagination. The Vroxian Empire had bombarded it with antimatter for a century before admitting defeat. The Quilathian Collective had surrounded it with their finest psionics for 3 generations, their minds breaking against its impenetrable defenses. Even the ancient Drell, with technology so advanced it seemed like magic, had studied it for millennia without progress. The monolith simply waited, unresponsive to all who approached. Dr. Elena Reyes leaned back in her chair, studying the most recent scans from the Earth's first interstellar research vessel, the Curiosity. As the lead archaeologist for the United Earth Exploration Initiative, she had been granted unprecedented access to data about the monolith, a gesture of begrudging cooperation from the coalition of advanced species that maintained the exclusion zone around Vega Prime. Dr. Reyes, her assistant, Kai, appeared in the doorway. The neural pattern analysis you requested just finished processing. Elena rubbed her eyes and checked her watch. She'd been staring at the same scans for 6 hours straight. And, she asked, stretching. The computer found something unusual. Kai's expression betrayed his excitement. When we overlay human neural oscillation patterns with the energy readings from the monolith's surface grooves, there's a 78% synchronicity. Elena froze. That's impossible. The Vroxians have neural patterns much more complex than ours. And they got nothing. That's just it, Kai said, sliding a tablet across her desk. The match only appears with human patterns, and specifically with the theta-gamma cross-frequency coupling that's unique to our species. Elena studied the data, her heart rate accelerating. The implications were staggering. If human brainwaves were somehow compatible with the monolith's energy signature, it could explain why no other species had been able to activate it. Within 24 hours, Elena found herself standing before the Interplanetary Council, presenting her findings to the most powerful humans in the solar system. The evidence suggests that humans may be uniquely positioned to interact with the monolith, she concluded, looking at the skeptical faces around her. I propose sending a small team to Vega Prime to test this theory. Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force scoffed. The Coalition barely tolerates our observation drones. They'll never allow humans to approach the monolith directly. Perhaps, Director Williams of Diplomatic Affairs interjected, that's precisely why we should ask. The monolith has been there for 10,000 years, and no species has made progress. If we present this data correctly, even the most xenophobic members of the Coalition might see the value in letting us try. 3 months later, Elena stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, Earth's newest diplomatic vessel, as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega system. Alongside her were 5 other specialists. Dr. James Wong, a neurologist, Commander Sarah Kovacs, their military liaison, Dr. Nandi Okafor, an expert in alien languages and cultures, technical specialist Maya Patel, who would handle any technological aspects, and Kai, who had insisted on joining what might be humanity's most important expedition. Coalition vessels approaching, announced the ship's eye. 3 Vroxian battlecruisers, 2 Quilathian sentinels, and 1 Drell observer. Open communications, ordered Captain Rivera. Standard diplomatic protocols. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a Vroxian High Commander, a 7-foot-tall insectoid with compound eyes that gleamed with intelligence and suspicion. Earth vessel. The Vroxian's translator module produced a metallic version of its chittering language. You have entered restricted space without Coalition authorization. Explain your presence immediately. Captain Rivera stepped forward. High Commander, we come with a formal request to approach the monolith based on new scientific findings. We have reason to believe humans may possess unique neural characteristics that could interact with the artifact. The Vrockshin's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation or amusement. Alina couldn't tell which. Every species believes they are special, the High Commander replied. Every species fails. What makes humans different? Dr. Reyes stepped forward. We don't claim superiority, High Commander, merely compatibility. Our neural patterns show a 78% synchronicity with the energy signatures from the monolith's surface features. We've transmitted the data for your analysis. Hours of tense negotiation followed, with the coalition species debating among themselves while the human expedition waited. Finally, the Vrockshin returned to the screen. Your request is granted, humans, it announced, mandibles now completely still in what Alina recognized as a posture of formal diplomacy. But with conditions. You will be escorted at all times. You will make no attempt to damage or remove the monolith. And you will share all findings with the coalition. Agreed. Captain Rivera nodded. 2 days later, Alina stood on the surface of Vega Prime, breathing recycled air through her environmental suit as she gazed up at the towering obsidian structure. The monolith was even more impressive in person, utterly featureless except for those strange, lightning-like grooves that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. The coalition had established a research base around the monolith, with representatives from 17 different species studying it from a respectful distance. None approached closer than 100 meters, the minimum safe distance established after centuries of experimentation. The energy field intensifies exponentially as you approach, explained the Quilathian scientist assigned as their guide. The translator rendered its harmonic vocalizations into crisp English. At 50 meters, it begins to disrupt neural functions in most species. At 25 meters, the disruption becomes painful. No one has successfully approached closer than 15 meters in the last 3,000 years. Alina exchanged glances with her team. And those who tried. The Quilathians' luminescent skin patterns darkened. Brain death. Instantaneous and irreversible. Dr. Wong adjusted the neural monitoring equipment they'd brought. We'll proceed cautiously. First, passive readings from the established safe distance. Then we'll move closer in 5-meter increments, retreating at the first sign of neural disruption. The initial readings confirmed their theory. The human brain's theta-gamma coupling patterns showed remarkable similarity to the energy patterns emanating from the monolith. But this was merely correlation, not proof of compatibility. I need to get closer, Alina decided after hours of collecting data. Commander Kovacs stepped forward. Protocol says I should go first. No, Alina shook her head. I'm the one who discovered the pattern match. It should be me. After a brief argument, they compromised. Alina would approach, but only to the 90-meter mark initially, with Kovacs monitoring her vitals remotely. As Alina walked toward the monolith, she could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching her, some with scientific curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility. The massive structure seemed to grow even larger as she approached, dominating her field of vision. At 90 meters, she stopped. No effects so far. Neural readings are stable. Proceed to 85 meters, Dr. Wong instructed through her comms. Step by step, Alina moved closer. At 70 meters, the alien scientists began murmuring among themselves. She had already passed the point where most species experience mild discomfort. At 50 meters, where neural disruption typically began, Alina felt nothing but a slight warming sensation in her temples. I'm continuing, she announced, ignoring the protests now coming through her comms. 40 meters, 30 meters, 25. Alina, stop. Kai's voice cracked with tension. You're entering the critical zone. But Alina barely heard him. At 20 meters from the monolith, something had changed. The grooves on its surface were definitely moving now, shifting like slow-motion lightning across the obsidian backdrop. And she could hear, no, feel, a rhythmic pulsing that perfectly matched the cadence of her own thoughts. "It's responding to me," she whispered. 15 meters, the point of no return for all previous attempts. Elena took another step forward. The coalition observers collectively held their breath as the human female stepped beyond the established lethal boundary. Many activated recording devices to document what they assumed would be her final moments. At 10 meters from the monolith, Elena Reyes placed her gloved hand against her temple, where the warming sensation had intensified. "The neural patterns are synchronizing," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's as if it's waiting for something." 5 meters. The surface of the monolith began to glow where the grooves intersected, points of light appearing like stars against the black background. 3 meters. Elena extended her hand toward the surface, drawn by an impulse she couldn't explain. 1 meter. Elena shook her head. "That's just it. They still don't understand. The monolith doesn't give power to one species over others. It's designed to be a unifying force." That night, alarms blared throughout the research base. The Vroxians had decided to take control of the situation, dispatching soldiers to detain the human team and restrict access to the monolith. "We need to get back to the artifact," Elena told her team as they barricaded themselves in their quarters. "There's something I've learned, something I need to complete." Commander Kovacs assessed their options. "Security is heaviest at the main entrance. We could try the maintenance tunnels that run under the observation platforms." With technical specialist Patel hacking into the base's systems to create diversions, the human team slipped through the maintenance tunnels. They emerged near the monolith just as dawn broke over Vega Prime, casting long shadows across the research base. "There they are," chittered a Vroxian guard, raising its weapon. "Elena, go," Commander Kovacs shouted, drawing her own sidearm. "We'll hold them off." Elena sprinted toward the monolith, dodging energy blasts that scorched the ground around her. The artifact seemed to respond to her approach, its grooves lighting up before she even touched it. This time, when her hand connected with the obsidian surface, she didn't just receive information. She sent her own thoughts back, guided by the understanding she'd gained over the past 10 days. The monolith's response was immediate and overwhelming. Light erupted not just from its surface, but from within, splitting the artifact along invisible seams. The obsidian exterior peeled away like the petals of a flower, revealing a core of swirling energy that pulsed in rhythm with Elena's heartbeat. Around the base, weapons fell silent as all eyes turned to the transformed monolith. "What is she doing?" the Vroxian High Commander demanded. The Drell observer watched with ancient eyes. "She is rewriting the rules." From the monolith's core, tendrils of light reached out, touching each sentient being within range: human, Vroxian, Colathian, Drell, and a dozen other species. As the light made contact, each individual experienced a momentary connection to every other, a flash of shared consciousness that transcended language and biology. In that moment, they understood what Elena had learned. The monolith was never meant to be conquered. It was designed to be a bridge between different forms of consciousness, a tool for cooperation rather than domination. When the light receded, Elena stood at the center of the transformed monolith, her eyes reflecting its inner glow. For 10,000 years, she addressed the assembled species, her voice somehow carrying to each of them in their native language. "You've tried to claim this artifact, to own its power. That was never possible. The precursors built it as a test, not of strength or intelligence, but of intention." She stepped forward, and the core of the monolith followed her like a living thing. "Humans aren't special because of our neural patterns," she continued. "We're compatible because we're young. We haven't yet learned to see the universe as a zero-sum game where one species must dominate others. We still have the capacity to approach the unknown with open minds rather than clenched fists." The Vroxian High Commander stepped forward, mandibles clicking slowly. "You speak of cooperation, yet you alone have accessed the monolith's secrets." "No longer," Elena smiled, extending her hand toward the insectoid. The final test wasn't whether one species could activate the key. It was whether that species would share what they found. Cautiously, the Vroxian extended its chitinous appendage. When it touched Alina's hand, a spark of the monolith's energy transferred between them, and the massive alien staggered back, compound eyes widening. "I understand," it said, voice stripped of its usual aggression. One by one, representatives of each species approached Alina, receiving the same transfer of understanding. The knowledge contained within the monolith began to flow freely, not as raw data, but as shared wisdom, accessible to all in proportion to their readiness to receive it. 6 months later, the Cosmic Concordat was signed on Vega Prime, establishing the first truly cooperative interstellar initiative in galactic history. Its purpose: to locate the remaining 6 keys and unlock the Nexus, not for any one species but for all sentient life. Alina Reyes, appointed as Earth's representative to the Concordat's Leadership Council, stood with her colleagues, human and alien alike, gazing up at the transformed monolith, now a permanent symbol of their shared purpose. "Alina? No!" Multiple voices shouted through her comms. Her fingertips touched the obsidian surface, and the monolith of Vega Prime, silent for 10,000 years, awakened, rewriting the cosmic rules. Light erupted from every groove on the monolith's surface, transforming the obsidian tower into a blazing beacon visible from orbit. Alina stood frozen, her hand seemingly fused to the artifact's surface as information flooded her consciousness. Not in words or images, but in pure conceptual understanding that reorganized itself into forms her human mind could comprehend. The observation base erupted into chaos. 17 species of scientists frantically recorded data, argued interpretations, or simply stared in disbelief. The Vroxian security forces moved to intervene, only to be held back by the senior Drell observer. "Wait," the ancient being commanded, its translucent form shimmering with internal bioluminescence. "The human lives. The monolith has accepted her." After what seemed like hours but was actually only minutes, the light receded, and Alina stumbled backward, caught by Commander Kovacs, who had rushed forward despite the danger. "What happened?" Dr. Wong demanded, scanning her with medical equipment. "Your neural activity was off the charts." "It spoke to me," Alina whispered, her eyes unfocused. "Not with words. With understanding." "What did it say?" Kai asked, helping her to a portable medical station the team had set up. Before Alina could answer, they were surrounded by coalition security forces, led by the Vroxian High Commander. "Your presence is now a matter of interstellar security," the massive insectoid announced. "You will be quarantined and questioned." Captain Rivera stepped between the aliens and Alina. "We agreed to share findings, not surrender our people." The standoff might have escalated if not for the intervention of the Drell observer, who glided forward on fields of manipulated gravity. "The monolith is chosen," the ancient being said, its voice resonating directly in their minds rather than through translators. "After 10 millennia of silence, it responds to humans. This cannot be ignored or suppressed." A compromise was reached. Alina and her team would remain on Vega Prime, continuing their research under observation, while representatives from each coalition species formed a committee to analyze the development. Over the next week, Alina approached the monolith repeatedly. Each time, the connection strengthened and more information transferred to her mind. She began to understand what the artifact truly was. "It's not a weapon or a power source," she explained to the joint human-alien research team. "It's an archive, a repository of knowledge from a civilization that existed before any of our species evolved." "What knowledge?" demanded the Vroxian representative. "Everything," Alina replied simply. "The nature of reality, the underlying principles of the universe, technologies we can't even imagine. But it's not just giving the information freely. It's testing us." "Testing how?" asked the Quilathian scientist. "Our approach, our intent." Alina struggled to translate the concepts the monolith had placed in her mind. For 10,000 years, species have tried to conquer it, to own it, to use its power for advantage. That's why it rejected everyone. The Drell observer's internal lights pulsed with what might have been recognition. And humans. We came seeking understanding, not control, Elena said. That's the difference. Not every species accepted this explanation. As the days passed and Elena continued to access information from the monolith, tensions rose. Several coalition members, particularly the militaristic fractions, began to view humans as a threat. If humans could access the knowledge of the precursors, the name Elena gave to the long-vanished builders of the monolith, they might leap ahead of other species technologically. On the 10th day, Elena made a breakthrough. With Dr. Wong monitoring her neural patterns and Dr. Okuffer helping interpret the symbolic language the monolith used, she accessed what appeared to be the central purpose of the artifact. It's a key, she announced to the research team. The first of 7 scattered across the galaxy. Together, they unlock something called the Nexus, a dimension of pure information. This revelation sent shockwaves through the coalition. Emergency sessions were called, military assets were mobilized, and suddenly the human expedition found themselves treated less like researchers and more like prisoners. They're afraid, Kai observed, watching alien warships arrive in orbit through the base's observatory dome. You've given humanity access to power they've coveted for millennia. The precursors left these artifacts as a challenge, she told a group of new arrivals. Not to see who was strongest or most clever, but to see who could overcome the instinct to dominate, who could rewrite the rules of interaction between different forms of intelligence. She smiled as she watched Vrakshin and human scientists working side by side, their former enmity replaced by cautious respect. Every alien species failed to conquer it, she continued, until humans showed them all that conquest was never the answer. Sometimes the most powerful act isn't taking control, it's letting go. Above them, the monolith pulsed with inner light, a beacon now not just for Vega Prime, but for a galaxy learning, step by step, to rewrite its oldest and most fundamental rules.